Chernobyl disaster happened on April 26, 1986 in Pripyat, Ukraine, in the USSR. And the three main points I'm going to be covering in this speech will be the meltdown, the causes that led to the meltdown, and then the spread of the pollution. Two would be the pollution that affected nature, being animals and plants, and the pollution that affected humans and human health. So the meltdown had many reasons for it happening, but the main reason was ultimately human error. So with human error in mind, they led testing on it to see how well it would function if power left the plant. And so when it is running for so long, it became critical. And so with it becoming critical, they decided to shut down the test and put a new core in the reactor. So with them putting a new core in there, it led to a positive void coefficient, which basically means with the new core being put in, it caused an increase in steam production, which caused an increase of pressure. And that's what ultimately led to the explosion happening, is that the pressure built up so high. And that also led to a fuel fragmentation, which was the fragmentation of the core and the nuclear fuel. And so with the explosions happening, the first one blew a hole, like holes in the reactor, and then the second one just blew a cap off the building, and that spread everything in all the pollution in the atmosphere. And so with the cleanup, the liquidators came in and they flooded the reactor, which didn't really help because they couldn't get to the reactors was flooded with water. They poured tons and tons and tons of clay, dirt, soil on top of it to help contain the radioactive material. And they also put an iron casing on it to enclose it for years and years. And so with the spread of it, if you look down at this map, so Pripyat, Ukraine is right here where this symbol is. And when the explosion happened, the winds took it up north and kind of over towards Sweden. And that's how they got discovered, is that Sweden got normally high readings on their nuclear power plant. They said, well, everything's fine here, so where is this coming from? They eventually traced it back to Ukraine, and that's how Ukraine was caught, because they were going to try to hide it. And so with the explosion of the reactor, it spread all across Europe, and the effects that it had on human health are very prominent. So the liquidators themselves did have an increase of cancer, but it cannot be proven because the data was inconclusive. So we cannot necessarily say that it was because of Chernobyl that there was an increase in cancer. But we can say that mental disorders were caused by Chernobyl because many of the liquidators left the accident with symptoms of depression as well as anxiety and other mental disorders. Now, there is a strong correlation between increase of thyroid cancer cases in children in the surrounding area and with exposure to nuclear radiation. It happened because children were still developing and they would eat food or drink water that had been polluted by radiation, and that caused them to get thyroid cancer. And if you look down at this model, this is a graph that shows, so 1986 is the beginning of when the Chernobyl event happened, and the bottom line is Ukraine, and that steadily rose, but not very much. But then you see huge rises in Belarus, and then the top line being Russia, of thyroid cases found in children. So now humans were not the only organisms affected by the radiation. Nature itself was affected. So the flora surrounding Ukraine as well as Europe showed damage to their DNA. Not all plants, but many were shown to have damaged DNA. And this led to lessened germination, as well as their seeds became abnormally shaped, and even their pollen rates were reduced. And now, when scientists conducted experiments, they focused on one species to see, and that was the barn swallow. And so the barn swallow, when they found nesting areas where the barn swallow was near Pripyat, and you can see here is a normal barn swallow, and right here you see how it has a loss of feathers. This one down here has an abnormal tail feather. This one has a tumor right under its beak, and then this right here has a abnormality on its beak. So they were able to conclude that since they were exposed to radiation, that it caused mutations in their physical traits. So now that you know the effects of the radiation that Chernobyl caused, you now know the scope of the situation and the dangers of nuclear power. Now, nuclear power is a very useful tool that humanity has used for quite some time now, but Chernobyl helped open humanity's eyes to the dangers of nuclear power, and it serves as a reminder that we can't just take it for granted.